Greetings and welcome to episode 50 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Settje Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Andrew Wadle, and I'm joined in the studio with my co-host, Brock Vitek.
Hey there, Andrew.
Hi, Brock. And so this is kind of a monumental episode, episode 50, but we're gonna talk about the importance of that. But before so, I want to introduce our special guest today, Jake Mayer, who is the engineering team lead at Settje Agri-Services and Engineering.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
No problem, Jake.
Hey, Jake.
And we're going to give Jake a chance to introduce himself and in a moment here, but we just want to welcome back our returning listeners, and we really appreciate the feedback that we get from you, and we're going to continue to deliver content to you that really makes a difference, when it comes to sustainability in all aspects of agriculture, because, we firmly believe that agriculture is the greatest example of sustainability and recycling that the world has ever known. But a little bit more specific, what for our new listeners, what does sustainability mean to Settje Agri-Services and Engineering? Well, it means a whole lot of things, but we tend to put things into three buckets, and our episodes really try to weave in and out of all these things. And the first is maybe the part of sustainability that comes to mind first, and that is protecting the air and the water, and that's keeping contaminants out of the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. Second part of sustainability is doing more with less and resource efficiency, getting a greater unit of output for every unit of input, and more or less taking care of what we have, and so and then the third part of sustainability is strong businesses. We need to have strong businesses with a community of people in agriculture that want to continue to do what agriculture does, and that is feed, clothe, and even to some extent fuel the world. So again, we want to welcome back our returning listeners and welcome our new listeners. And before we kick it over to Jake to learn a little bit more about him, I mentioned this is episode 50, isn't it, Brock?
It is. It's Sustaining the Herd's 50th birthday.
Yeah, and is 50 isn't over the hill, is it, Jake? You're not
not quite yet.
We're going to keep climbing the new heights
that's
on
right.
Sustaining the Herd.
Well, I like to think that sustaining the herd is in like turtle years or galaxy years, so that at 50 is nothing. We're just still getting better and better. We're just getting broken in here. So again, Jake, we really appreciate you being part of this. We consider it a monumental episode. It's almost 2 years worth of episodes, and so thank you for joining us. And tell us about Jake Mayer.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. Yeah. Brock's been hitting me up for a while to do this, and we finally just made time today, and so it's glad to be a part of the 50th episode. Start the story at the beginning. So. I was actually born in Southwest Kansas in feed yard country. My dad is a large animal veterinarian and has been involved in feedlot consulting. He's recently retired, but his entire career, first half in private consulting, and then the second half with one of the large pharmaceutical companies. So from day one, I've been in and around feed yards. Grew up in eastern Nebraska. Went off to college over in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa State. Got my bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering. The 22-year-old version of me was not super excited about growing up and paying bills and taxes, and so now I think they call it a gap year, but at the time I was just screwing off. So it's been about a year in South Dakota, working for a family friend on their ranch. They run quite a few mama cows, and maybe seeing a little bit different side of the industry, and living in South Dakota. And I got a call from an acquaintance who had graduated from Iowa State also with his doctorate degree and was starting his research program down at Mississippi State. And if he promised me that If I moved to Mississippi, the weather would be warmer and the girls would be prettier, and I took him up on it. So, have a master's degree in agricultural engineering from Mississippi State. Most of my master's research I was actually done in Nebraska, though at the Meat Animal Research Center. So we worked on a heat stress project and out there at Mark at Clay Center, and so I was finishing up. Had the chance to kind of cross paths with Dean, with some mutual friends connected us, and that was almost 15 years ago. Been at Settje Agri-Services ever since. Started on small things and small projects, and that size of projects and workload and responsibilities has kind of grown over time as the company's grown, and so that's kind of how you got me here today.
Jake, first of all, for what our audience might find a bit of interesting is Jake and I are a bit of kindred spirits in a way, because we both have bachelor's degrees in ag engineering, master's degrees in ag engineering, and professional licenses in professional license in agricultural engineering. Is that right, Jake?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew.
Yep, that's pretty awesome. So I'd say we might be some of the very few in that regard. But so really appreciate learning a little bit more about you. So when you start talking about large projects and increasing responsibility, what would you consider to be a large project these days?
I guess in terms of head count, I would say anything that's impacting, kind of maybe that 40 to 50,000 head range, whether that's new greenfield site, expansion of an existing yard, or remodel. That's probably what feels large to me at this point. So
gotcha. And when we talk about designing a feedlot, can you just go through what aspects of the feedlot you're involved in designing? And I'm going to guess the answer might be all aspects, but can you just go through bits and pieces of what that is?
Yeah, at this point in today's in the way our company's set up today, that it really is pretty much all inclusive. Sort of the site development, and so grading and excavation, utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, electrical, wells, fiber communications, and then kind of above ground as well. Then concrete, paving, fencing. Shade structures. We definitely are involved in conversations around the feed mills and feed manufacturing, commodity receiving, and then also cattle handling facilities, processing barns, hospitals, those sorts of components as well. So
very good. Well, Jake, the last thing you mentioned there is a great segue into our topic today, because for all of our listeners, today we will be asking Jake some questions and learning from him as it relates to cattle handling facilities and processing barns, loadouts, all of those types of things. So to kick that off, Jake, could you just talk about the importance of handling cattle safely? And by handling them safely, I mean safe to the cattle, as well as to make sure that they're not only not being injured, but also maintaining their economic value and not causing any issues during the handling process as well.
Yeah. And the fun part about what we get to do is there's kind of this, when we talk about working facilities, there's kind of this three-way interaction. And obviously we have live animals that we're working with. We have human beings that are also part of that equation, and then we have the facilities themselves. And so there's neglecting one of those pillars, causes the stool to topple, if you will. And so, your question to working cattle safely, it certainly feels like some of that is common sense. The way the markets are today, those animals are such a high value, but there's also a fundamental, I would say, obligation on our end to, as stewards of those animals, to treat them with respect and take care of them, right? And so, they're a valuable part of our business. And as Andrew alluded to in his intro, economic viability is definitely a part of sustainability. But there's also this kind of underlying focus on doing the right thing, and treating those animals well and handling them slow and carefully benefits really all three of those facets. Moving things quiet and slow is good for the animals and the people, but it also prolongs the life of the facilities too. So that's definitely something that we're mindful of when we have these conversations.
And Jake, a lot of our listeners are what we like to call our friends from the people in town, and they really don't have a real full understanding of what the whole process is for raising beef cattle. And can you just give a sense for the importance? Of course, there's doing the right thing is the right thing, but what happens when cattle are injured, and what happens, how does it affect the value proposition when these cattle go to get sold?
Yeah. Sure, Andrew. I think there's the obvious is, anytime we have an animal that would, have an injury, right? Like that's kind of, the obvious choice. But I think more so today, whether it be our facility owners, managers, their staff, their consulting veterinarian, we've done a good job, I think, as a whole, minimizing what I would call, trauma and injuries. But to take that the next step further is really thinking about it's stress, right? And whenever we put animals in a stressful situation, and whether that's environmental, right? When we have poor pen conditions, and we've got mud and bad weather, that creates stress, and those animals do not perform as well. Their feed intake will drop, and their conversion is not as good of that feed to red meat. And the same is true in these handling facilities. We obviously can't communicate verbally with those animals, and so we can't necessarily always convey our good intentions to them by telling them, hey, we're going to give you a shot to help you feel better. We know you don't feel good today. It's not like going into the doctor's office. Well, sometimes it is when you've got little kids, but for the most part, that's not how we're communicating. And so, whether that be by our posture or position, how we're applying pressure with our presence, because cattle are a herd animal, and they have a flight zone, and we can influence that flight zone and allow them to move in certain directions by how we position ourselves. So today it kind of becomes more so a conversation about how do we work those cattle, move those cattle, handle those cattle in a way that minimizes stress on them, which ultimately translates back into them performing to their full potential.
Very good. So, Jake, I think you've done a great job establishing the importance of proper cattle handling when it comes to just simply doing the right thing. The caretakers of these animals, the care of these animals is entrusted to them. So let's just do the right thing every single day. But also, we understand there's an economic benefit as well. So moving on from that, especially for our listeners who may not be familiar with beef cattle production, as Andrew mentioned, could you just talk about the purpose of a processing building? Because some people might hear processing building and think the packing plant, like processing. Sure. We know it's not that. It's a working facility instead. But yeah, just why do we have a processing building at a feedlot or on a cattle operation?
Yeah. Well, my suspicion is for those folks that have been listening for the last 49 episodes that they've maybe one thing they've uncovered is there is almost its own language of how we describe certain features of animal husbandry or these facilities themselves. So there's a few interchangeable kind of terms, and depending on who you ask, they may use different ones. But how I would describe it, Brock, is that there are certain animal health procedures and protocols in place at these feed yards that are routine in nature, that we want to do for all animals, whether they're hopefully all of them are healthy. To equating that to human medicine, it's like it's your annual wellness check, right? Like there's certain things that we want to do on regular intervals to just make sure everybody stays healthy. Parasite control would be one of those things that we would do. Some things like ear tags and animal identification, knowing who's who. Those are things we're going to do to all the healthy animals that we have in the feed yard. There's also some things that we do to combat illness and disease, particularly when we have sick animals. Right? It's no different to make the parallel to human medicine. If you get sick, a lot of times you'll go to the doctor. So to kind of come back to those facilities, the way I would describe it is the processing barn is where those routine animal husbandry practices happen, that everybody's going through and participating in. Our hospital is where the sort of sick and injured animals are given particular care for their sort of individual situation. And these animals are evaluated daily by a staff of caretakers to identify sick and injured animals. As we I mentioned, they're a herd animal, and their instinct is to not show any weakness, right, in the pen. And so we've got to train our employees to spot those animals, because they're not going to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I don't feel good today." We've got to look for that. So that's kind of when we talk about some of these facilities. It's processing barn is kind of those routine procedures and the practices. Hospital is more specific, and then we kind of have this sort of broad umbrella that encompasses a lot of different facilities. And we call them working facilities. And so some of that, that may involve things like shipping and receiving and cattle arriving on trucks or departing the feed yard at the end of the feeding period, and loading them out, staging those cattle prior to shipping and receiving, prior to processing. So that kind of all-encompassing term is sort of working facility. The processing barn is a part of that. And then our hospitals help us take care of sick and injured animals. So,
yeah, I know the processing and working facilities is really a small percentage of a feedlot's total land footprint. but still a
Right.
critical component, and the feedlot really couldn't
Yeah.
operate without it.
That's right, Brock. Yeah. Even if an animal arrives healthy, he stays healthy for the entire feeding period, he's still going to go through that working facility at least once, and often cases may make a few trips through there. Aside from the feed mill, which is obviously we're feeding these animals every day. It's certainly one of the kind of critical infrastructure pieces in facility design, and definitely one we enjoy working on and spending time designing and building for sure.
Yeah, this all reminds me of back to many episodes ago when we had John Schrader, who you I'm sure know very, very well, and John related a feedlot as being a city for cows, or city for cattle, and so you have your feed mill, your restaurants, you have your pens, which are your houses and your beds, and you have your working facility and hospital, which would be your hospital, your urgent care. And so everything that we have in society, the cattle have on a feedlot, more or less.
Yeah, definitely.
If I may paraphrase John Schrader,
Yeah, I think you're safe there in that particular context. I don't know if I'd repeat all the stories John tells, but that one feels pretty
John,
safe.
did you hear that?
I think John kept it pretty PG for the podcast.
That's right.
That's good.
We might have
they're certainly they're a great customer, and had the opportunity to design a working facility for John and Craig out there, and turned out to be a really, really nice project.
It's a Cadillac of a facility too. It's nice. You did a great job with it, you and your team.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the things that go on in a working processing building. You didn't mention weighing cattle. Is that normally built into the chutes? And
yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can do that, Andrew. That's the fun part about this, and for me, it's the fun part about the cattle industry in general. Is there's not there's no two feed yards that are alike, and there's no two feed yard managers that have the same style. Even within sometimes companies that have multiple yards, yard to yard, there's variability depending on who's making decisions. So. These all kind of get to be one-off sort of projects. But yeah, weighing of cattle, live animals can definitely be a part of that working facility footprint. Sometimes we're weighing cattle on the truck. Sometimes we're weighing them live on a large scale as a group. A lot of the chutes that we install that in our processing barns, in our hospitals, have an integrated scale. They sit on load cells, so we can get individual animal weights. That certainly helps us with dosing of the pharmaceutical products by knowing what that individual animal weighs. So there's a couple different ways we can look at weighing, and sometimes it's one or the other, and sometimes it's all of the above. So.
And how does automation fit into all of that? What's with AI and whatnot? How does automation fit into these facilities?
Yeah, again, you kind of get the whole spectrum. Some of our automation is not automation, right? It's manually pulling a lever to open a gate. Sometimes it's less automated than that, and you're actually doing the latch and swinging the gate open. Right? It's manual operated gates.
Right.
Sometimes they're hydraulically operated, but manually opened and closed. But we definitely are seeing more and more interest with being able from chute-side to select and predetermine how animals are sorted and grouped. So there's definitely some things that we're starting to see, and certainly seeing more and more interest in how that works. So
Very good. Jake, could you just walk us through, just at a high level, what steps you go through in the design process, and maybe take this from the angles of both a brand new processing facility, and then maybe, or like for a greenfield feedlot, but then also, you know, putting a facility into an existing feedlot. I know we actually worked together on one of those recently.
yeah, Brock. I like to really start high level. I think there's a tendency to start drawing fences and gates right out of the get go, and sometimes
Yep.
those drawings are on a napkin, right? But it helps me to really understand the right. I always equate the process to putting together a puzzle, and the first thing that we want to do with the puzzle is we want to get all the pieces out and we want to turn them right side up. And so when it comes to the design process, particularly related to a working facility, it's just having a conversation about what do you want to be able to do here. What size groups are you going to bring to here? How many ways do we want to sort? Are we, what's sort of the idea of the kind of the business plan of the yard? Are we receiving, 400-pound beef on dairy crosses? Are we pulling all of these cattle? Are they all yearlings coming from backgrounders and they're already on feed? Like, what are those pieces? Let's start by having a conversation there, because then the other thing that I've found before I ever draw a gate or a fence, that I like to try and do is just put together a almost like a flow chart, right? Like a process diagram of,
Yeah.
We're going to have cattle come in here, and sometimes they'll go to their home pen for a couple days before we come back to the processing. Or I want to be able to keep them close overnight, and I'm going to work them the next day. Or I'm going to work them as soon as they get off the truck. They're going to not there. I don't want them to sit there more than a few hours before they go through the barn. And kind of, sort of build that design concept without ever really doing much. A lot of talk, a little bit of talking, a lot of listening, but mostly just kind of figuring out what we want this to do. Then we can sort of dive into getting the right pieces, getting them the right size, and then it's just a matter of arranging those pieces based on our sort of site constraints, right? So to your point about building one of these facilities in an existing feed yard or in an existing footprint, like where are their roads? Where are their utilities? Where are their fences today? What space do we have to work with? And then you can kind of manipulate those pieces into a kind of a footprint that makes sense, from a cattle flow standpoint and how they move in and out of there. There's definitely some logistical. These are, as Andrew related them to being kind of a medical center. There's some logistics of moving cattle and moving humans, moving wheeled traffic through them, and so trying to figure out the flow component of how things move in and out. Is definitely something we're spending a lot of time thinking about early on in a design.
Yeah, for sure. As you're describing what it looks like to go through that design process, it reminds me, for a while, I used to have a bit of a mindset that, processing barns are pretty similar. It's a copy paste type of thing. And I think sometimes people have that mindset. And both you and Travis Casperson, who our listeners are familiar with, because Travis has been our guest a couple of times, you guys help me understand, yes, while there are some similarities, each one is still unique to the operation. And it's not just a copy paste from the previous project. There are a lot of unique, maybe custom considerations that come into play. No two processing facilities are the same, even though there could be some similarities.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot. The key components are almost universal, Brock. But I mean, it's no different than houses, right? I mean, most houses have a kitchen, and they have a restroom, and they have a garage, and so we've got kind of these sort of standard pieces, but some houses have 6 bathrooms and some have 1, and some houses have a 4-car garage and some have 1, and so the size and the configuration of all those components, again, you have those same pieces, but where I think that historically we've done a really good job of the design process is building relationships with our customers, really understanding their goals, their wishes, their constraints, and then matching solutions, building facilities that fit what they do and what they want to be able to do. That creates sort of this kind of custom piece, a one of a kind for their particular scenario. It's not just an off the shelf that, hey, this is how we do this. We're going to build it like this because that's how we do it. Now we're gonna build it how you want it and how you need it, and to make this piece of infrastructure, kind of going back to that 3-way interaction, like understanding the cattle, understanding the people, allows us to get the facility component of that right, or at least close. Anyway.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. So we started out talking about the importance of handling cattle safely and properly. Just walk through what that design process looked like. I'd like to narrow down a little more and ask, so we understand the importance of safety, but what are some specific things to take into consideration when it comes to human safety and cattle safety and handling? Or maybe if you'd have like a top couple or 3 of them that always come up for you.
Yeah. So I would say that one of the biggest things, right? We're working with live animals. We're working with large live animals, and so it's just to generalize a little bit is it's proximity, right? Like how and then barriers, because we want to interact with those animals. We want to be able to apply pressure to allow them to basically ask them to move by how we've positioned, how and where we position ourselves in relationship to them. But we don't want to be too close that we're in harm's way. So one of the things that we've a lot of times, like as we get close to these facilities, we're working in fairly small and fairly tight spaces, and what I mean by that, like some of these pens might be 14 to 16 feet wide, and a lot of times our holding pens are 60 to 100 feet long, and so you're kind of working in this alleyway, and if you're in there with those cattle, and one's having a bad day, there's really nothing between you and him. And so what we've done a lot of here of late is really put in some what I would call like a man pass alley. And so in between two cattle pens, we've got a walkway for humans that's got a fence between you and them. And so they're still able to see you. You're still able to influence their movement. But if somebody decides they're having a bad day, there's still a physical barrier of that fence between you and them.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the things. In terms of cattle and their safety, probably the biggest thing is, like, I've been in some facilities that, in hindsight were antiquated. They maybe made some poor design decisions, but they really worked pretty well. And that's because the human beings that were using them really understood them, and they took their time, and they were slow, and they were quiet, and they were able to basically over manage the situation they were in. Now, sometimes that requires a different skill set or higher level, or maybe more people to do that, but it can be done. So that's first and foremost, no matter what facility you're in. Those slow, quiet movements. That's always a good place to start. But I think about a couple things, Brock, specifically, and one is footing. We want those cattle to have sure footing. We don't want them slipping, falling, and so there's a couple products that, or a couple things that we can do, and one is textured concrete, and how we groove some of that concrete in a cobblestone pattern, particularly where we're asking cattle to maybe change direction. And then the other thing is mats, and we use a variety of different styles of rubber mats, from fairly smooth with almost like rippled texture to pretty aggressive that's almost cleated, like you'd like on a tracked vehicle, if you will. So that footing. But then the other thing is minimizing the number of corners and angles and turns that they have to make. So that's a kind of a design feature of thinking through that cattle flow, and how do we minimize the number of turns and jogs, and make their path efficient. So we just reduce the number of opportunities there are for things like bruising shoulders on a corner post, or slipping because we're asking them to make a turn, things like that. So
sure.
Just a couple things, maybe. I don't know if that's quite gets into enough detail for you, but that's
no, definitely
things that come to mind.
No, definitely. So as we start to wrap things up here a bit, just a couple more questions, Jake.
Sure.
As we've talked through all these design considerations, what are the design features that people most often miss, and that you and your team like to bring up to make sure they don't miss them?
One thing that we take a lot of pride in, and this is more of a human thing than it is an animal thing. But obviously, when you move into one of these facilities, or you move into a new house, right? It's all clean and new. But we want to set these facilities up because, again, we're working with live animals, and they get dirty, and we want to take care of them, and we want to keep them clean. And so we've over the years have put a lot of thought into how do we best do that. And what we know without a doubt is the easier you make it to clean up when you're done at the end of the day, the more likely it gets done, and the better job that folks are going to do keeping it clean.
Yeah.
So you'll see in projects that we work on, lots of floor drains. Pretty much all of them at this point have a flush system in them. So there's water that's plumbed into the drain itself to keep the drain clean. We use a lot of fiberglass grading material that's structurally very strong, but significantly lighter than like a metal or steel grate. So it's easy to just lift up and out of the way and clean better.
Yep.
We use kind of a two-stage approach to cleaning with wash down, where we have a kind of a high volume, more like a fire hose, an 1.5 to 2-inch hose to sort of flood everything, and then we'll come back with a power washer, high pressure, and kind of blast everything off and get it away from the site. And then also with kind of heating and ventilating those spaces, and combination of forced air and radiant heat, a lot of times in those buildings, keeping things comfortable for the people working in there. They're going to do a better job, whether giving vaccinations or what, putting in ear tags or whatever it is they're doing, when they're comfortable. It's we know that those folks are doing a better job. So I would say that's a place that historically gets overlooked or skimped, right? We're truly building this for the cattle, and I would say that by and large, the components of these facilities that are for the cattle are okay, but a lot of times we don't think quite as highly about the people working in them, and so some of the things we do with keeping cleaning and wash down at the end of the day and heating and keeping them comfortable while they're working, I'd say that's maybe some things that get overlooked a lot, Rock.
Sure. Yeah, and it's like you said, I think the cattle components of the facility are pretty good, and overlook the people components. And while those people components may not matter as much, I do think still that at the end of the day, if the human beings that are operating the facility are comfortable and have the resources they need to do their job well and be efficient, the cattle will ultimately benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jake, my final question for you, need you to, you're wearing your hat, hopefully that's your thinking hat, need you to look to the future and just like to ask, say in the next 5, maybe 10 years, what do you think will be the biggest innovations in cattle handling and working facilities that might be coming at us? If you had to make a guess.
Yeah, well,
I want your opinion.
Sure. And Andrew, I think it was Andrew that kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier about the automation component. I think there's a lot of opportunities and interest in automation and even potentially robotics. I know that there's a couple in the processing facilities, and this time I do mean packing plants, slaughterhouses, where they use some robots to move cattle. I don't necessarily know as that becomes the mainstream, but I think there's at least potential there. Also, we've come a long ways in this industry with genetic testing. And so I think there's a chance that we've got all of this data and, maybe at the cow calf level and making breeding decisions, we're using some of it. But how much of that is, trickling into the feed yard, and are we sorting cattle using genetic pedigrees? I don't know, Brock. I guess I'm trying to get out here far enough on a limb that I answer your question, but not fall out of the tree. But
sure.
I would say there's definitely some things related to automation and robotics that I think will continue to expand and grow over the next decade.
Sure, that's exciting to think about, and I like that you're getting out on a limb a little bit there, and making some predictions. So yeah,
sure.
I think we're going to continue to see more automation, more labor efficiency, just more efficient in general. And the genetic sorting on genetic pedigrees, I think that's going to become more of a thing as well. And maybe we've seen some of that already with beef on dairy and just some of the somewhat closed loop at least, supply chains within the industry.
Yeah.
So
it'll be fun to go along for the ride for sure.
Yeah, it definitely will. Well, Jake, I must say, whether or not you think you have this title, I'll consider you our resident expert on cattle handling and working facilities here at Settje. So really appreciate you taking the time to jump on with Andrew and I here today and all of our listeners for this milestone at episode 50. And any parting words you have?
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate all the people that have been tuning in since the beginning, and those are maybe listening for the first time. Definitely been fun to watch the podcast grow, and thank you for having me today, Brock.
Yeah, well, thanks for being a supporter, and I'll mention to our listeners. If you're a cattle producer and anything that Jake had to say today resonated with you, or you would be interested to have Jake and his team here at Settje help you take a look at your facility or one you'd like to build, reach out to us at podcast@settje.com or contact us via our website, and we can get you in touch with Jake and our sales team to talk about that. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that, Brock.
And with that, thanks to you, all of our listeners, both new and returning, for joining us for episode 50. As we said earlier, it's only up from here. Maybe sustaining the herd to the moon. I'm not sure. Artemis 2 has been out there, so we'll see what the future holds for the podcast. And we look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, thanks for joining the herd today.